Hello and welcome to our presentation on the nutrition of the honeybee. We hope that you learn quite a bit about the honeybee diet, including topics like malnutrition and development of larvae. To begin, we must first cover the general nutrition of the honeybee. Nectar is the primary source of carbs for the hive, where around 1.6 liters of nectar are consumed per day. That is, assuming a 35% sugar concentration fits in the nectar that was collected. That's around 31 microliters of nectar per bee, with lower consumption in winter due to lack of flights and decreased brood rearing. This nectar is collected via the proboscis of a forager bee and stored within the honey crop. A forager can generally carry about 25% of its body weight in nectar until it must return to the hive where it is dried and stored in cells as honey until it is needed. As for the protein, pollen is the only source for a honeybee. Larvae consume very large amounts of pollen in a form known as bee bread. Since bees require the same 10 amino acids to function as other animals, including humans, pollen is a very important resource needing to be foraged. It is collected by a forager in the pollen basket, which is a small hairy region located on the hind legs, and placed into a pollen cell upon return to the beehive. Here it is pounded into a paste-like consistency by workers for later consumption. Similarly to most insects, honeybees lack any ability to synthesize sterols. For this reason, honeybees prefer pollen that is high in lipid content. Pollen is also full of necessary vitamins like folic acid and ascorbic acid, as well as minerals like calcium and potassium, which are all required for honeybee survival. Water itself is foraged to cool the hive and is needed to rehydrate honey within the winter. Interestingly, because of the difference in temperature between the hive and the environment within the winter, water usually condenses at the entrance of the hive for easy collection. Unfortunately, this condensation is far more than needed by the hive and must be removed in order to maintain a survivable temperature. Royal jelly is also a part of the honeybee diet, primarily given to the queen larva. It consists mostly of water, but half of the dry weight is major royal jelly protein. It also contains sugars and lipids, meaning every dietary requirement, carbs, proteins, and lipids, are contained in the royal jelly consumed by the queen.
One of the major factors of nutrition is its effect on the development of honeybees. Pollen can be separated into two main categories. There are monofloral pollens and polyfloral pollens. These types of pollens have different protein compositions, which result in either fast growth of the hypopharyngeal gland, prominent expression of genes in the abdomen, and a high tolerance for Nosema serina, or it leads to no effect on these factors at all. Monofloral pollens either have high concentrations of protein, such as the rubus flower, or low pollen concentrations of protein, such as the cistus flower. The polyfloral pollen has a medium amount of protein, which does not affect the development. The pollen and amino acid amounts in each flower are positively correlated. The rubus flower has the most impact on honeybee development. With the pollen, honeybees make bee bread, which is fed to the drones and larvae. The larvae that get the bee bread have no chance of becoming a queen. To have a successful drone, it is required for them to eat plenty of protein-rich bee bread since it helps with their development. An underdeveloped drone will not have the weight required to produce enough semen, which will result in them being unsuccessful drones.
Since nutrition is so important to the hive, malnutrition is something to pay attention to as well. Adult bees do not have a lot of energy reserves, so they must eat often. Different malnutrition of macromolecules can have varying effects on the hive. Protein malnutrition is detrimental because it's such a big part of development. Pollen is crucial to development as it's the main source of protein in a bee's diet. The larvae are really dependent on this protein for growth, so lacking things like L-isoleucine, L-leucine, or L-valine, which are integral amino acids, can lead to developmental issues. Brood cannot be supported long in hives that don't have enough protein. So hives with brood tend to lose more weight during times like winter months when there's not as much protein readily available. During these times, civilicide may occur, which is when adult bees will eat the brood for protein for the other larvae. Younger brood tend to be eaten first, and the older larvae are kept alive because they've had more energy put into them already. An experiment published in the journal Behavioral Ecology and Sociobiology found that nursing of older larvae does not change very much during times of dearth. It's also been found that a mixture of pollens is optimal for protein in a hive, gives the most varying protein, and helps with nutrition. Lack of pollen can lead to slowed thoracic growth, which makes the bees smaller and impacts their wing development and foraging later in life. Carbohydrate malnutrition is also bad, but not as much as protein. Adults can survive for a long time with carbs, but live longer when they're eating pollen for protein as well. Some sugars and hydroxymethylfurfural are toxic to bees. The hydroxymethylfurfural is formed by some sugar dehydration and can appear in their honey. Malnutrition can also affect the hive as a whole, not just adults and larvae, since the hive is a superorganism. Starvation, the most extreme malnutrition, is the most common reason that hives die in the winter. Mass of their fat bodies and the development of hypopharyngeal glands and ovaries depends on protein intake. Fat bodies are a source of energy for the bees and an indicator of their immunocompetence. The hypopharyngeal glands and ovaries help brood development and production, and if these are impacted by protein intake, it can also impact the brood. Malnourished larvae become impaired adults. They're dwarves that have a reduced weight and body size, and they later on have trouble with ecdysis. Time the nurse bees spend caring for larvae show if a hive is possibly in dearth through their level of investment. Food shortages cause early onset of foraging in a bee's life, which will shorten their lifespan and shorten the lifespan of the hive as a whole. Malnutrition makes the effects of parasites worse as well, because adults don't have enough energy or a good enough immune system to fight off the parasites and the diseases that they can vector. Bees can also take back or even mix in pesticides with their foraged foods, which can appear in their honey. Bad weather and bad food sources can also be a cause of malnutrition because the bees can't get out to forage and are not getting the nutrients that they need when they are foraging. These can have detrimental impacts to the hive and must be taken with extreme caution.